Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar. Today, our topic is workers' rights in Finland. This webinar is organized by the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, and today we'd like to tell you about your rights when you're working here in Finland. The multicultural network called Moniheli has also helped us in planning and advertising this webinar, and I'll be the host of this event. Next slide, please. Before we get started, just a few practical issues I'd like to say. The webinar will be recorded and the recording will be available later on this address you see on this slide right now. You can find the presentations that we'll show today also from the same website address. If you have any questions, please ask them. We are happy to answer, but please write them to our chat and we'll answer you in the chat. Next slide. Then a very short introduction to what we do here at the Occupational Safety and Health Authorities. We are, first of all, governmental organizations. We serve both employers and employees by giving guidance in employment-related questions. Our OSH inspectors also supervise the employers and go to workplaces to do inspections. Next, please. But in today's webinar, we have two speakers who are both also occupational safety and health inspectors. What we'll tell you, so you'll see the topics right here. We'll tell you first about the things, well, in general, the things you should know when you're working in Finland, as I said, but also so that you can make sure you're treated fairly at your workplace. And in the first and the bigger part of this event, you'll hear about these topics, actually the points from 1 to 7, and they deal with or focus on the minimum rights of the employment according to the Finnish labor legislation. Our aim is, however, to tell you these issues more in practical rather than legal terms. Then in the second and final part, the final point on the slide, problems at workplace, we'll try to give you some practical advices, what you can do in case you face problems at your workplace. But now, let me give the floor to our first speaker, please.
Thank you, and good afternoon also on my behalf. I'll start my part of the presentation with a very important matter, equality. In Finland, everyone has the same rights and obligations at work. Same rules goes for foreign employers and employees, as well as Finnish ones. Discrimination at work is prohibited. From employees' point of view, this means, for example, that you must not be treated less favorably because of your age, nationality, religion, etc. Your salary can't be lower than others just because you're a foreigner. You are allowed to join a trade union if you like, and you're entitled to different kind of leaves like sick leave or family leave, as well as others. It is good to remember that an employer may not discriminate against employees when making decisions about work tasks, advancement opportunities, or employment terminations. Discrimination is also prohibited in recruitment. This basically means that job seekers must be treated equally. It is forbidden to use discriminatory job advertisements when recruiting, meaning that qualities which aren't necessary for a certain work should not be required from the job seekers. A practical example is that an employer is not allowed to demand a job seeker must be fluent in Finnish or Swedish if this skill isn't really even relevant in that certain work. It is also good to remember that a recruiter isn't allowed to ask whatever they like in a job interview. Only questions that are relevant information for the work are okay. Personal questions like how many kids do you have? Do you plan to have children? Or information about your family background should not be asked. Please note that this was not a full list of irrelevant questions. Next, some basic information about the right to work here in Finland. It depends on your situation whether you need a special permit to work in Finland. EU citizens may work in Finland without a special permit. However, they must register their residency if their stay in Finland lasts more than 3 months. This also applies to the citizens of Iceland, Liechtenstein, Norway, and Switzerland. Citizens who come from outside the EU countries usually need a residence permit or visa granting the right to work in Finland. This is the main rule. However, there are few exceptions, but we won't go into those special cases in this presentation. Asylum seekers may work in Finland once their waiting period has passed. If an asylum seeker has provided an official travel document, the waiting time is 3 months. If no, then it's 6 months. The waiting time starts when the application for asylum has been submitted. In Finland, employers must ensure that their employees have the right to work here. This obligation comes straight from the legislation. Basically, the only way to do this is to see employees' passport and possible residence permit card or visa. In addition to this, the employers have an obligation to store the information of foreign employees' right to work for 4 years after the termination of the employment. This is why the employer needs to take copies or pictures of foreign employees' passport and possibly residence permit card or visa. However, a copy or a picture is enough. The employer has no reason to store employees' passport or residence permit card. These documents should always be left into employees' possession. Employment contract. An employment contract is an agreement made between an employer and an employee. It is a free-form contract which binds both of the parties. However, what can be agreed in an employment contract is limited by the provisions of the employment legislation and collective agreements. An employment contract can be made for indefinite period or for fixed term if there is a proper reason for it. The contract can be written or verbally made. Even though a verbally made employment contract is as binding as a written one, in practice, we definitely encourage you to make written contracts just to avoid any misunderstandings and to secure the legal rights of both parties, employers and employees. Verbally made agreement may be difficult to verify later on in case of a disagreement. An employment contract must include the principal terms of employment. You may see the terms here on the list. If you make a verbal employment contract, your employer must still give these principal terms to you in writing at the end of the first pay period, the latest. For your own security, please check your employment contract carefully before signing it and make sure that you fully understand what you're signing. If there is something you do not understand, ask the employer to explain it to you. By signing the contract, you accept its terms and conditions. Here you can see a good template for an employment contract. To download this template, just follow the link to our website and scroll down to Forms. Job seekers and employees, please remember that your employer has no right to ask you for money for an employment contract. This is a criminal offense here in Finland. Collective agreements. Collective agreements are made between trade unions and employer unions. They are more specific than the Finnish employment legislation and define the minimum terms and conditions in matters like pay and working hours. It's important to remember that a collective agreement and an employment contract are two different things. In Finland, collective agreements are usually called by the word TES, T-I-S. Collective agreements are usually field-specific. This means that, for example, restaurant sector, transport sector, and agribusiness all have their own agreements with their own provisions. Universally binding collective agreements are common in Finland. If there is a universally binding collective agreement in force in the sector, every employer on that specific sector must follow it. For example, the restaurant sector has a universally binding collective agreement. So this means that all the restaurants that have employees must follow the provisions of the collective agreement. Collective agreements are available online on a website called finlex.fi. Unfortunately, the agreements are only in Finnish and Swedish. However, some of the unions do have translations available on their own website, but this really depends on the union. Next, about wages and salary. Let's start with the basic information about pay. Unlike in many other countries, in Finland, the minimum wage isn't stated in the legislation. The minimum wage varies between different sectors and even between different work duties. This is why the minimum wages are stated in collective agreements. If you do overtime work or work on Sundays, your employer should usually pay you additional bonuses for this. If there is a collective agreement in force in your own working sector, we recommend you to check the provisions of the collective agreement concerning overtime and Sunday work, so you'll know what kind of bonuses you're entitled to. Usually, wages are paid into the bank account which the employee has informed to the employer. However, there is a possibility to pay the wages in cash if there are compelling reasons for it. For example, if the employee does not have a bank account, it's okay to pay wages in cash. However, in this case, the employer has at least to give a receipt of the cash payment. Wages must be available to the employee on the payday, no matter how they are paid. As I already mentioned, there is no one and exact minimum wage here in Finland. It varies. Here you can see a good example of how the minimum wages can be presented in a collective agreement. As you can see, in the building sector, the minimum wage of a new employee is smaller than the minimum wage of a highly experienced professional, meaning that the professional skills of the employee defines the minimum wage. Please remember that this is just one example, and the purpose is to give you an idea of how the minimum wages can differ here in Finland. So remember to check your own collective agreement. Employers must give payslip to their employees in connection with every wage payment. The payslip must show the amount of pay and how it was determined, so that the employees may easily check out that their wages are paid correctly. This basically means that if you have worked, for example, overtime or on Sundays, these additional bonuses should be specified in the payslip. Payslips are important documents for the employees because they are needed, for example, for applying various social security benefits. Here's an example of a typical payslip. Unfortunately, it's in Finnish. However, the payslip should include your basic pay, additional bonuses, taxes and other deductions, and then net pay, obviously. Then about training and trial period. Employer can't keep employees on unpaid internships or trainings unless the training is related to school studies or a working trial of the employment office. These kind of trainings may be unpaid, but proper agreements need to be done between the workplace and school or workplace and employment office. Please note that it is not possible to volunteer in a normal business where the work is normally performed by paid employees. Employer and employee may agree on a trial period at the beginning of the employment relationship. This way, the employer may test whether the employee is suitable for the work or not. During the trial period, both employer and employee may terminate the employment relationship without a notice period. This is why the terms of the trial period should be agreed clearly between the employer and the employee. Trial period can't be unpaid, so the employer must pay salary to the employee during the trial period. Maximum length of a trial period is 6 months. However, in fixed-term contracts, the length of a trial period cannot exceed half the length of the contract. Then about working hours. Normal working hours in Finland are 37.5 or 40 hours per week. And usually the employees get to keep 2 days off per week. If you work more than 8 hours a day or more than 40 hours a week, you are usually entitled to overtime pay. Remember that your employer can't force you to work overtime. You always need to agree on it. Collective agreements may contain other provisions concerning all these matters which I have just mentioned. Next, I'll show you a practical example from the restaurant industry where the working hours can be up to 112.5 hours in 3 weeks' time, rather than the typical 40 hours per week. As you can see here in the example, on week 1, the employee has more working days and working hours than on the next 2 weeks. However, the total hours are 112.5 hours in a 3 weeks period, so it's in line with the binding collective agreement of a restaurant industry. Then shortly about work shifts. An employer must provide a shift list to the employees in advance. The list should be made as far as possible, but at least for a week's time. The shift list must be visible to the employees, and it should show when the work shift starts and when it ends, as well as the breaks. Even though your employer has a shift list visible on the workplace, it is a good idea to keep your own record of your realized working hours by writing down your daily starting and finishing times. Okay, this last topic of my part is about annual holiday. If you work at least 14 days or 35 hours a month, you will get annual leave. If your employment relationship has lasted less than a year, you will earn 2 annual leave days per month. After the first year, you'll earn 2.5 leave days per month. During your annual holiday, you're entitled to get holiday pay. This means that annual holiday is a paid holiday. If you don't get to keep your annual holiday, your employer must pay compensation for the earned annual leave days. This is called holiday compensation. When you receive either holiday pay or holiday compensation, your employer must also give you a payslip, which is again an important document for the employee. For more information about annual holiday and different kind of holiday payments, please check out our website. Thank you on my behalf. This was the last slide of my part, and next our host will continue.
Thank you. So we heard now about how you should be treated at the workplace and what kinds of terms and practices you should expect in an employment relationship. I see that there were quite many questions in the chat. It's good that you're active and post your questions there. There was one about these slides and presentations and if you can receive them to your email later, but we won't be sending them to your email, but you can download them and they are available on our website. The address was given in the beginning, but it will come later on the slides. So don't worry, you can still get the address and go there later to download the slides. And I know that there was a lot of information, so don't worry, you can return to the details later when you have maybe more time to read all the things of the slides. Okay, but next we will hear now what you can do in practice if things don't go as they should at your workplace. So I'll ask for our next speaker. Please share your presentation.
Good afternoon also on my behalf. Now I will tell you what you can do if you face problems at workplace and what you can do and where to get help. If you face problems at work, first talk to your supervisor or employer. You can also talk to an employee representative. An employee representative is a co-worker who is selected by the employees. You have the right to ask for help. It is good that you have evidence of solving the problem, so save the messages about the matter, for examples in your phone or on paper. From our telephone service, you can ask, for example, for advices in matters related to employment contracts, payment, working hours, annual holidays, and other employment terms. You can call us anonymously. Our inspectors answer your questions in English from Tuesday to Thursday at 9 to 12, and in Finnish and Swedish from Monday to Friday at 9 to 3. There are many documents that are important to get from your employer. Here you see examples of which documents you are entitled to get from your employer. If you face problems at work, these documents can help you to clear uncertain situations. They might also be important when you apply for benefits or when you apply for a new job. If you need a document that was listed at the previous slide, first ask for it from your employer. Your employer has the obligation to give it to you. If you don't get it, you can contact us. Please note that in this case, our inspectors need your permission to ask your employer for their documents to you. Our inspector can then ask your employer to provide it to you. What can you do if you have questions concerning your salary? Write down your working hours, for example, in your calendar. Write also down when you have been on breaks, because these notes can be useful information if your employer doesn't pay your salary right. For example, if your employer hasn't paid you night shift compensation or overtime bonus, ask your employer in written to correct it. In this situation, it is important that you have written down your working hours. Your whole salary can't be withheld because of a debt. Remember that if your employer don't correct the error, you can be in contact with your trade union or legal aid office. You find the contact information to legal aid office behind this web link. If your employer does not have enough money to pay your wages, you might be able to get your wages from PaySecurity. The application must be submitted within 3 months, so don't hesitate to do the application to PaySecurity. We can advise you on how your wages should be paid and monitor if you have been discriminated in work life. Please note that we can't calculate your wages and we can't apply for missing wages, for example, overtime pay. In these matters, you can contact your trade union or legal aid office. Then some words about safety and health at work. If you get sick, inform your employer. Your employer can ask you to show a doctor's certificate, and you have the obligation to show the certificate to your employer. If you face an accident or injury at work, inform your employer immediately. You can read more about this matter at our website. If you have worked too much and feel exhausted, inform your employer. Your employer has the obligation to intervene. You can also contact your occupational health care or a doctor. Every employee is entitled to occupational health care. Ask your employer where your occupational health care is organized. This information should also be visible at your workplace, for example, on the notice board. Occupational health care includes preventative actions, but not necessarily medical care in case of sickness. You can read more about occupational health care on our website. Then some information about termination of employment contract. A fixed-term employment contract is valid for the time agreed. It ends without notice at the end of the term or when the agreed work is completed. It can be terminated in the middle of the agreed time only if it's agreed in your employment contract. If you have a permanent employment contract, your employer can terminate it. However, your employer always has to have a legal reason to do that. For example, you shouldn't be fired for being sick or pregnant. Your employer has to give you the reasons of termination and the date when the contract ends in writing if you ask for it. Before your employment relationship is terminated, you must be given an opportunities to state your opinion of the reasons for termination. You are entitled to use an assistant for that. There is also a notice period when terminating an employment contract. The period of notice is specified in the Employment Contracts Act or in the collective agreement. You have the obligation to work until the end of the notice period, and you are entitled to salary. What can you do if you get fired for no reason? You don't have to sign any papers right away. You are allowed to contact your trade union or legal aid office for help before signing any paper. Your employer can't deny you from using assistance. Earlier in this presentation, we have given you examples of matters which can be discriminating. Next, I will give you some advices on what to do if you face discrimination at work. First, inform your supervisor that you have experienced discrimination. In these discussions, you are entitled to assistance from your employee representative. If the discrimination continues, you can call us and we can advise you what to do. Then some words about Light Entrepreneur. When you work in Finland, you are either an employee or self-employed. Nowadays, more and more people work as light entrepreneurs. It usually means that you are self-employed and invoice the customer through an invoicing service company. However, it is possible that a light entrepreneur is in fact an employee, and then they should get, for example, salary, overtime pay, and annual holidays based on Finnish legislation. Remember that your employer can't force you to start light entrepreneurship or be self-employed. Your employer can't change your employment to light entrepreneurship without your permission. You find more information about obligations in being a light entrepreneur from tax administration. You see the web link here at this slide. Next, we have listed some useful web links for you. From our website, you will find more information about employment relationship, work conditions, and occupational safety and health in Finnish, Swedish, and English. From our website, you also find this guide for foreign employees in Finland. It will soon be available in these listed languages. And you can print it on paper if you want to. From this page, you will find information about living in Finland. This web page also includes work-related matters. If you suspect a crime, you can be in contact with the police. You can also be in contact with victim support or assistance system for victims of human trafficking. No one can forbid you to be in contact with these organizations. Here you will find useful web pages to different authorities in Finland. This was the end of our presentation. Before you leave, our host has some words for you.
Thank you for the presentation. That was all from our speakers today. But as said, a few more things I'd like to say about the presentations. Here's the link on this slide right now where you can download all this material, and it's also free for you to use later on if you have any possibility of an event or friends or anybody who would be interested in these issues. You're free to use this material and share it later. Also the recording, as I said, there will be a recording and it will be at the same place. It will take a few days before it's there, so don't worry, it's not going to be there today, but you'll find it in a few days. Move on to the next slide then, please. We would appreciate a lot if you could give us some feedback on how it went in your opinion. After this event has ended, you will receive an email where we ask for this feedback from you, and we really hope you could take a moment to answer it so that next time we can do even better job with this kind of events. And also the final thing I want to mention is that the chat is still open for another 10 minutes, but unfortunately there has been a lot of questions and the amount of them is a little bigger than we expected. So we won't be able to answer all of them in this event now. I really hope that you call us on our phone service if your question hasn't been answered in the 10 minutes that we still keep the chat open. The number of the phone service, we have the English service line and the number was given earlier on these slides. So when you download them, you'll get the number from there as well. It was open in English from Tuesday to Thursday from 9 to 12. So you can take down those dates and times and make sure that you have time to call then later on. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, we've come so far that we are at the thank you slide. So I'll conclude that the event has come to an end from our speakers part at least, but feel free to stay and follow the discussion at the chat, and I hope you get the answers that you asked in there. I also hope you found this information useful that we shared with you today, and I hope you find it useful in the future also if you share this presentation with somebody else who might be interested in it. But now I thank you all, wherever you were by your laptop or wherever you followed this webinar. Thanks for participating, and I wish you a good weekend. Thank you.